someone who knows more about this is Brigitte PERRIN, and would like to ask Brigitte to come over here and to join me as a kind of co-host, because, yeah, I can tell what you do, whatever, but I hate that, actually. This is Brigitte.
Hello.
Brigitte, what are you doing at the WMO?
At WMO, I'm the Chief of Communication, so I'm leading a small team, and we have, of course, a big challenge on our shoulders is to communicate about climate change, climate, educate people, communicate with the media, with our members in each country, and so on and so forth.
What's your background?
So I have similar background than most of you. I'm a former journalist. First, I worked for newspapers for about 10 years, and then I spent 10 years in the Swiss television. So I've done all sorts of things there, from cooking magazines to diplomatic interviews and elections and everything. I did everything except weather forecast.
And not even on climate stuff.
Not at all on climate stuff. Well, I mean, sometimes I did some interviews about climate when I was working in the news, but nothing. I was not a specialized journalist in climate.
But why did you make the move to a climate weather institute?
So, beside being a journalist, when I was young, I'm not young anymore, I used to do paragliding. I'm born in the Swiss mountains, and there I started wanting to visit the mountains from above. So I decided to get my paragliding license. And you know that in Switzerland, to get a paragliding license, you need to get through a complete meteorological course. So I did it, and I became passionate about weather. So I was working as a journalist for many, many years without talking about the weather. And then later on, I joined the UN, first in Africa, then in New York. I worked on many different aspects of the UN work, including building the Sustainable Development Goals. That was back from 2013, 2015. And then I saw this amazing opportunity at WMO to kind of work together, link weather and communication. And this is the dream job for me.
Because we saw at Mark, the moment his eyes start twinkling and his voice starts, what's the moment for you? When are you start to twinkle?
I think when anyone I meet starts to understand what we're doing, what WMO is doing. It's not easy because WMO is a scientific organization full of experts, working with meteorologists using very complicated words. And sometimes I'm reaching out to some young people, and I recently invited 200 young people from 16 to 18 years old, and they started asking me the right question. And this is where I really feel that I'm doing my job, when people start understanding what is the matter, what is the problem, how we can deal with this problem. It's not an easy task, because we need to remain very accurate. Whatever we say, as you know, there are a lot of climate denialists around the world, so whatever we say needs to be correct, needs to be accurate, and it's absolutely not easy to find simple words to say to tell about scientific issues. So this is my real challenge and objective, and I hope this workshop will also help you, because you are the vectors of this accessible information. I hope this workshop will help you communicate about the weather like I like doing.
That's what we're going to do later on. First, well, we like to see you shine. So take the floor and explain us a little bit more about this early warning and the initiative for all. Okay?
Absolutely.
Brigitte.
Thank you very much. So as Elga mentioned, the early warnings for all initiative, I don't know if there are any, yeah, the slides. So early warnings for all. The UN Secretary General has called us to lead the effort together with UNDRR, IFRC, oh, thank you, and ITU, which are UNDRR and ITU are UN specialized agencies. IFRC is the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent, which is not the ICRC, but a federation of all the Red Crosses you have in all your countries. So I'm going to go through what is this Early Warnings for All initiative, why and how we are moving forward in the implementation, and what is the challenge for us to communicate about it. So first of all, you may have heard or read or seen on Twitter or whatever that September, after July and August, has been identified as the hottest September on Earth of all times, right? And you may have used also this graph here. This graph is terrible because it means that more and more extreme weather will happen in the world, all around the world. Every single day we hear, and thanks to you, some of you and the WhatsApp group where we receive all these news, every single day there's something happening, which means that there is a pressing need to develop these early warnings. And the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, understood that, and he said, yes, we need to act for climate, but we also need to protect lives. And the best way to adapt at the moment to protect lives is to build early warning systems all around the world. So how to do it? 4 agencies, each of them being at one of the timeline of an early warning. So first of all, UNDRR, they are preparing people. Everything they do is to prepare people for any extreme event happening, hazards. So they are collecting all the knowledge about it. They are communicating, advocating for disaster risk preparedness. Then what comes next? We need observations, monitoring. We need data in order to make sure that the warning is accurate and that we are not warning people for nothing, right? And this is a big challenge, and this is where WMO is leading this second pillar. We are leading this pillar because, of course, with our members, we are the ones providing this data. But the problem is, as you may know, in many countries in the world, actually 50% of the countries in the world don't have efficient early warning systems in place. So this means that there is a need for an urgent investment in these early warning systems to make sure we can then predict on a smaller scale what will happen. Thanks to the satellites and thanks to this amazing new imagery, we can definitely help predict, and this is absolutely needed in all countries, including the most developed ones. But of course, there is also a pressing need for local and ground observations around the world. And this is what the Early Warnings for All is about. So then, of course, preparedness response capabilities. This is for after the disaster, once a hazard has happened. And we hope we are not using anymore the word disaster when we talk about Early Warnings for All. We use the word hazards. It doesn't have to be a disaster. And if we have efficient early warnings in place, we won't have a disaster. It's a hazard, right? So this may be helpful for you as well when you talk to on TV. Let's talk it a hazard before it becomes a disaster. Let's be optimistic, right? So ITU, International Telecommunication Union, is in charge of building and standardizing the infrastructure to deliver these early warnings through phones, through many different technical ways to disseminate the early warnings. And so then IFRC. So this value chain is quite important. I don't want to go too much into detail here, but if you're interested, you can also visit the website. So we are acting, this value chain is implemented currently at the global, regional, and national level. And we are now, for 2023, focusing on 30 countries. They are not necessarily priority countries, they are focus countries because we need to start somewhere. And these countries, I think some of you, who is represented in the room? I know some of these countries are represented here. Djibouti, at least. Well, I don't know if you can read because it's a bit small. But after this first step of implementation, of course, this will be scaling up to cover the other 82 countries that don't have early warnings, efficient early warnings in place. So yeah, an action plan has been presented at COP last year. It was a lot of work for WMO to come up with a plan just 6 months after having received this call from the UNSG. It was presented there. It got a very high political support from all countries in the world, and this will continue at COP28, and we are asked to provide some early successes stories at COP28 already with some first monitoring. Yeah, what does it mean for communication? We will definitely, as I said, have more and more extreme weather events around the world. And it has nothing to do with south or north, everywhere, right? There is a growing interest for adaptation measures in the population. People want to understand how to kind of remain safe. Sometimes we tend to think that people want to hear about mitigation more, right? It's true, we still need to talk about mitigation. What can we do to stop this process? But adaptation is as important, because if we don't adapt, then of course the lives will be lost, right? So we can definitely, we need to develop this communication around the adaptation measures to make sure the population understands it's not happening tomorrow, it's happening now, and now we need to adapt, right? And you all in this room can be of a great help to communicate about adaptation. Early warnings in particular, the big challenge is the acceptance of early warnings. First of all, accepting that climate change is happening is a first step. And then accepting that an early warning can be issued and that everyone should follow these early warnings is an enormous challenge, because some people may prioritize economic elements, private elements, their belongings, their families. They don't want to let everyone behind. They don't know, they are not sure they will be able at some point to come back home, and this creates a lot of anxiety. So early warnings is something people need to be prepared to receive, and this is where we are. This is the reason why we decided to work on this today with you. Disinformation can also come in the way when some people say, well, they pretend the cyclone is approaching, but this cyclone is actually not really approaching, or they are exaggerating the strength of that cyclone. What do you do? The best way to do it is to make sure people are expecting these warnings, are trusting these warnings, and anyone in communication can be of great help for that. So this is what I wanted to tell you about early warnings for all initiative. You will probably hear about it a lot in the coming 4 years. And now the transition. Helga, I give you the floor again.